Hello, hello. My name is Jess, and this is Patient POV. And before we get started, I'm going to say the housekeeping things before I forget. So you can find me at Jess underscore and underscore Elda, ELDA. Elda is my service dog in training, and so that is our Instagram account in case you were wondering. And we had a really great conversation today, which I'll speak to in just a moment. But anything that she says or anything that is referenced to in any of the episodes, you can always find more information, links, summary sentences about the actual episode in the description. So that's always available on Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, which is where the podcast is posted to. So just a reminder there. So today during this episode we had a really great conversation with Amy, and she was undiagnosed with endometriosis for 16 years. And so now that she is diagnosed, she knows she has endometriosis and how she kind of handles her situation with that. She also has a podcast specifically about endometriosis and having a chronic health condition, and she's also a published author. So if you want to check out any of her stuff, that's also linked in the description. But it was a really great conversation, so I'm really excited for you to be able to listen. On to me, I kind of delayed. If you're watching the video, I'm a little not looking as cute as we could be, but that's all right. We're showing up still. So this week I had an allergic reaction. I'm celiac, and so haven't been feeling the greatest this weekend. And then this past week we went to Toronto. So I'm just outside Ottawa, and we went to Toronto for some appointments. So it's been a busy week. We're also into exam season, so that's why I missed 2 Sundays over the last month or so. And so that is because things are just busy right now, but we'll try to be getting back to being more consistent with posting the episodes. But I appreciate everybody who listens in. And if you have any feedback or requests, please let me know. And yeah, that's all from me. And I hope you have a great week ahead. Thanks so much. Bye. So hello, hello. How are you?
Hi, Jess. Thank you so much for having me today.
No worries. Thank you so much for joining me today. So do you want to start by just giving us a little introduction on who you are and kind of your health background?
Sure. So, my name is Amy Corfelli, and my health background. I think all of us, our health background is like so long, years and years and years of struggle to be diagnosed, to be heard, struggles to get the treatment that we need, stories of misdiagnosis, dismissal, all of that. So, to keep it really brief, I have endometriosis and I am an endometriosis advocate. It took me 16 years to get diagnosed with endometriosis. I was so lucky and privileged to have excision surgery at 33 years old, 16 years after my symptoms started, which they began in high school. Always have had really, really severe symptoms of endometriosis, and of course, didn't know what I had because, it was that same old story of there's nothing wrong with you, it's all in your head. It's just anxiety. So, I think a lot of flailing about and a lot of blaming myself and a lot of thinking that it was my fault that I was sick because of, all these reasons that I had made up of why I was inadequate or why I wasn't doing enough. So currently I'm 39 years old and I have a podcast on endometriosis called In 16 Years of Endometriosis. I'm also a published author. I have a book called Finding Peace with a Devastating Disease, which is about they're really just reflections about my journey to try to find peace with endometriosis, to ultimately acknowledge that I have this horrible illness called endometriosis, and to try to live the best life that I can with this illness because this illness is chronic and there's no cure and it's not going anywhere.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. So I try to do something with all the guests that come on is is there any shows, movies, or TV shows, movies, or like podcasts that you're listening to, or books that you're reading right now that you're enjoying right now?
Well, I would love to shout out to my friend Kimither, who has a podcast called Endo Thick of It. It's an absolutely fabulous podcast about chronic illness and when you're a couple navigating chronic illness. And then in terms of shows, I'm just really into, so I speak Spanish and I'm just really into watching like telenovelas on Netflix. So I'm just currently watching a really juicy one, a Mexican one about a surrogate mother and a big drama that's unfolding.
Very nice. Thank you for that. I try to see what everyone's into right now. So why don't we chat about what have some of your biggest challenges been while facing these? I know you said you were 16 years undiagnosed. How has that been, and how have you managed to cope with that?
Yeah, I think, there's so many challenges that I could pick out in terms of having a chronic illness. Of course, the challenges of getting diagnosed, being believed, accessing proper treatment. But I think to really highlight one is a challenge of having finding compassion with myself, right? Because I feel like with endometriosis and with chronic illness, we are put in so many situations that we never expected to be in, right? Like it is so absolutely so difficult to learn to navigate this disease as endometriosis pain takes over your body, takes over your life, seemingly it takes over your soul. You know, the devastation of endometriosis wreaks havoc, at least in my own case, on my relationships, my career, even my ability to plan things, to meet up with people, on the weight, on what I can eat, on everything. It's like on one day, every day I'm just like, I don't even know if I'm going to be able to get out of bed, to walk to the mailbox, to do all these little things and big things that people, many non-chronically ill, non-disabled people really take for granted. So I think for me, the biggest challenge has really just been to learning how to be flexible and learning how to let go of the resentment that I have towards my body and really embrace and accept the body that I have. Learning how to process my grief instead of getting stuck in my grief as I did for, I would say, over a decade. I was just, I was stuck. I was stuck in these really valid emotions, these valid emotions of rage and sadness and frustration, because endometriosis, it is so unjust and it is so infuriating. But it came to a point where the disease was destroying my life. And then the emotions that I felt toward the disease, toward my body, was equally destroying my life. So I've really spent the last like 10 years trying to re-find happiness and relook at what does happiness even mean to me? Like, what is this deep happiness, this sense of being at peace, this having joy and meaning again in my life?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. So you also were mentioning that you had some, well, I mean, 16 years of being undiagnosed. You were mentioning that you were having some doctors kind of say that it was normal, or it's, all in your head, or those different common things. So what has your experience like been with the healthcare system? You're in the United States? Yeah, okay. So how have you navigated that healthcare system, like that side of the conversation of the healthcare or the chronic illness?
Yeah, so, I am from the United States and I live there now, but I actually lived abroad for 10 years. So when I was looking for treatment, I was looking for treatment in the United States, the state I live in now, and then the state I lived in about 10 years ago. I also looked for care in Spain and I also looked for care in Japan. And apart from the obstacles, of course, of living in a foreign country and like even though I speak the languages, it's not the same having when you don't have that like background medical knowledge of just like how the medical system works, how the insurance system works. Maybe you lack vocabulary to like properly try to express how you, where it hurts, what you're looking for from the doctor. So apart from like additional hurdles that I faced when I was living abroad, I really just felt like it was the same in all the places that I looked for doctors. Maybe I'd gone, I mean, I don't know, a rough estimate, 20, 30 different doctors over 16 years. And um, I think unfortunately, just as we know, misogyny runs so deep in our culture and also in medicine. And in my experience and that of many, it's like as soon as the tests come back and the tests are normal, it's almost immediately turns to a mental health diagnosis, right? Like, "Oh, are you under stress, honey?" Or, "Are you feeling anxious?" I even had one doctor in Spain, he did an ultrasound looking for endometriosis, he didn't find any. Of course, I didn't know at the time that, I mean, I believed what he said, but he was like, "Oh, you can see endo on the ultrasound, so you don't have any, so your ultrasound is clear, so you don't have endo," which couldn't be farther from the truth, as not all endometriosis is seen on ultrasound. But he just took out his prescription pad and then he wrote down anxiety, and then he basically gave me a referral to a psychiatrist. Um, and he really marked that was really a defining moment for me. That was 20 years ago. And I still remember that appointment as if it was yesterday because he really made me doubt myself. I'd been looking for answers for about 2 or 3 years at that point, but he was so cold and cutting and just, "You have anxiety, go see a psychiatrist." And, after years of not getting an answer, not knowing what's wrong with you, I just really, really internalized what he said, and I really thought that that I was just crazy and that I don't know, there was just, like, something inherently wrong with me, and I stopped going to doctors after that, I stopped advocating, and even the people in my life, my family, and the partner I had at the time, who later became my husband, and now we're divorced, but even that shaped the way that he felt about my illness, because since that doctor said that, he just, like, stopped believing my illness was real, and he just thought I was this hypochondriac exaggerating my pains. So I think it's hard. It's really hard to navigate the medical system and the dismissal because you can end up internalizing that. And that's what I did. And I stopped trusting myself and I stopped trusting my voice. And then I spent the next several years, on the wellness culture train, trying different diets, trying different lifestyle. There were things that helped. There were also things that didn't, or just, were waste of money. And there was a overwhelming feeling of me being inadequate, because apparently there was nothing wrong with me, and apparently nothing that I did, whether it was change my diet, my lifestyle, journal my repressed emotions, work on my mental health, exercise more, like plant medicine, just so many things that I was doing that people seemingly have had big breakthroughs with and improve their health. I was just getting worse that whole time.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Now, you were mentioning that, just for context for everyone who's listening, you were mentioning that endometriosis doesn't always show up on an ultrasound. So, how is a very concrete way of getting diagnosed with endometriosis?
Yeah, so the only way to have a 100% confirmed diagnosis of endometriosis is through laparoscopy, because you need that pathology report. So what they do is then they would excise the tissue and they would send it off to pathology, and then in pathology they would be able to actually test and see, is this endometriosis or not. There are certain, endometriosis can be seen on scans like MRI, ultrasound, sometimes. So with the caveat that it's going to depend on your type of endometriosis, if it's superficial endometriomas, deep endometriosis, it's going to depend on who's reading the ultrasound. So the expertise of the technician or the doctor. It can even depend on the machine that they use to do these scans. So I will say that this doctor was just a regular old gynecologist. He was not any kind of expert in endometriosis. And typically that usually in that case, I mean, some of these doctors, it's like you could have something that's even very obvious on an ultrasound. but maybe the doctor just doesn't even know how to spot the signs of endometriosis. So, long story short, you may be able to see the signs of endometriosis on an ultrasound or MRI, but 100% confirmed diagnosis is laparoscopy with a pathology report. And just because your ultrasound or MRI comes back clear does not mean that you don't have endometriosis.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that clarification. So now that you are diagnosed, you are kind of, I'm assuming, doing some things to help you cope with it. What would a day in the life routine kind of look like? If you can nail one down.
Oh my goodness. Well, I will say that since my excision surgery, actually all of my endometriosis pain symptoms have gone away. Now I'm not symptom free, and that is because I still, basically what I learned with excision is that excision is not my only driver of symptoms and pain. So since excision, which I had 5 years ago, and I've been 5 years pain free since then, but I do deal with all these other symptoms. It seems that I have mast activation syndrome. I was dealing with SIBO. Definitely have a bunch of perimenopause symptoms right now, which is like destroying my life. So what does a day in the life look like? I would say it's hard to pin down an exact routine, but I think my daily life is really about asking myself, what do I need? And so I'm constantly checking in with myself. And I'm trying to really cater to what my body needs and do it with a sense of gentleness and self compassion. So let's say that, so I do have a job. So I start at 9 o'clock every day. I try to wake up at 8 o'clock because then I can, like not be rushed to go to work. But there's a lot of days when I cannot get up at 8 o'clock and I'm waking up right at 8:58 and going to my computer because I do have that privilege of being able to work from home. So it's just like a lot of checking in with myself. Like my alarm goes off and I'm like, okay, can I get up? Or like, do I feel exhausted and then I need to rest more? What do I want to eat this morning? So every day it's like taking the time to check in with myself in terms of my sleep, my exercise, my food, my stress levels. I feel like now I have a lot of tools for coping and for supporting myself that I really just did not have for like the first 30 years of my life. Tools that I've come across actually post diagnosis, but tools for coping with, my feelings. I love doing things like tapping. If I start to get some anxiety or if I get like feelings of shame or feeling of guilt, I do a lot of like tapping or emotional freedom technique. I do a lot of stretching and foam rolling, and I like to do yoga, qigong, or take a walk, or so it's just like I do have a routine, but it kind of rotates and it kind of depends on how I'm feeling. And I think that's so important instead of pushing myself and being like, no, I have to get up and I have to exercise and I have to eat vegetables at this meal. It's like, do I need to rest more? Do I need to skip my exercise today? Or instead of taking a walk, maybe can I just do some gentle stretches? Okay, sure, it'd be great to eat vegetables at this meal because vegetables are important, but I'm really nauseous. Maybe I'm just going to eat a soup or a bowl of oatmeal.
Yeah, awesome. So taking it literally day by day is amazing for sure. You were also mentioning some really great tips, which was going to be my next question actually, was if there was any resources or tips or tools that you use to kind of help when you're having a not so great day, or think resources you've learned from.
Yeah, I absolutely love the phrase. I think it's from, oh, it's slipping my mind. Peter Levine, and it's something like without the tools, trauma rules. So it's to say that like if you have tools in place that work for you, they can really help you to have, you know, a better life, right? They can help you to have a structure in terms of your day. It can help you with your mental health. So I'm just all about the tools. And I think what's been really helpful for me is I've become really into DBT in the past couple of years, and I have a library card, and I love to just you know, get online with my the library app, get the digital books, but of course they also have physical books. But yeah, get some books on like coping tools for anxiety, tools for acceptance. There's tools for letting go of um, your self critic and like not being so judgmental and not blaming yourself so much. Tools for self compassion, so I think there's so much out there, like a quick Google search. If you have a library card, there's also, if you don't, there's all kinds of like amazing worksheets online to help you identify things like distorted thinking. I used to have so much catastrophizing and black and white thinking. And of course, a lot of that is natural. Like if you don't feel good every single day, it's just like it's natural that, when your pain flares, you're going to have thoughts about your pain. But I was just, if my pain or symptoms would flare, I would just like immediately go into a tailspin, you know, thinking that, okay, I'm going to have to cancel my plans later. I might have to go to the emergency room. Then I'd be like imagining myself in the emergency room. And likely I wouldn't need to go to the emergency room, but my brain was taking it from 0 to 60. So just like learning how to get a better control of my mind and a better control of my thoughts and learning that, just because I think something doesn't mean that it is the truth. Just because I think it's my fault I'm sick, that doesn't mean it's true. In fact, it's not true. Just because I think I'm a burden, that doesn't mean it's true. And in fact, it's not true. So I think for me, a really helpful tool has been learning that there are tools available and that the more that I practice these tools, the better I get at them. And I don't have to, like, it's hard to know what tools you need when everything is, I think of myself when I was like 25 years old and I was just blaming myself all the time for my illness. I was so mean to myself. I had no self compassion. I was constantly I was afraid all the time, afraid of the food that I was gonna eat because I was, it was probably gonna make me sick, afraid of going to the bathroom because my bowel movements were excruciating. Um, I was just like living this constant chaos and this constant fight or flight and this constant trauma response. Um, and then learning that there are tools and just like going online and being like, I want to have more self compassion. How can I do that? I want to have more peace in my life. How can I do that? And that has been absolutely life changing.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you for that. That's great ideas for sure. And then you also mentioned how your support system has kind of evolved a little bit. How has it affected you in terms of how is your support system? Who is your support system now? And is that an important aspect to your life?
I think support is so important, but it can be very, very hard to get the support that we need. And I can definitely say that for the first like 30 years of my life, I really didn't have any support in terms of my chronic illness, for a variety of reasons, but just problems with family. Yeah, partners that just didn't care, friends that didn't care. Um, and that's really hard. It's really hard to be going to these doctor's appointments by yourself, to be scared and traumatized and not know how to advocate for yourself, too overwhelmed, too sick, too much in pain to advocate for yourself, and then to come home, have had a horrible appointment, and really have no one to talk to about it. In fact, if I were to talk to someone, let's say in my early 20s or like late teens about it, it probably would have been, dismissed, gaslit, or laughed at, or told to just be quiet, or that, what I was saying wasn't important. Um, so for me early on, I think I had to learn how to support myself. And what that looked like was a lot of writing in my journal, a lot of just journal writing. I mean, it wasn't even a journal. It was just like I would open up my computer at my laptop and I would just start pounding the keyboard and just, saying everything that in my head that I wish that I could say to share with someone. Um, As time went on, I've been managed to find support. I have a really supportive partner and I have a really supportive best friend. And then I have, the endometriosis community, different support groups that I'm part of. I love seeing people's posts on Instagram, posting my own things on Instagram, and interacting with people. But I would say I probably only have like really two people who in my life, my physical offline life, who really support me. And they're great. I mean, I guess after having 0 for so long, I guess I'm really satisfied with having 2 high quality people. Um, but it is yeah, it's really hard because I guess I wanna say, like, if you're in a situation where you're not getting the support that you need, I think that can be just, like, absolutely soul crushing. And for me, it was about then limiting limiting toxic interactions. So instead of looking for support in people I knew that couldn't give it to me, just like limiting toxic interactions. So yes, they weren't supporting me, but also like they weren't gaslighting me. So it just was kind of neutral. And then I went to look for that support in different aspects of my life.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much for that. And then my last question for you is if somebody was in the midst of starting this chronic health journey, or think they have endometriosis, or they just got diagnosed with endometriosis, or any of these chronic conditions, um, do you have any words of encouragement to them or some advice for them if they were just starting this out or in the midst of all these struggles?
Well, I think if someone is just starting out on this endometriosis journey, um, I think there's such a wonderful community of people with endometriosis. And I think it is exactly because of what we've been talking about, where it is so hard it's so hard to be believed, whether that's in the doctor's office. It is so hard to be believed, whether that's by friends and family. So many people, they don't even know what endometriosis is. And they think it's just a bad period, which we know that it's not. And, you know, ableism is so prevalent in our society, and that leads to all of these comments, right? Like when you're opening up about your problems or your health issues, and people are just like, "Oh well, it can't be that bad," or "Well, at least it's not cancer." And I think we're just like faced with so many dismissive comments over and over and over, like from every sphere of our life. And so I think for a lot of people with endometriosis, finding the endometriosis community, whether that's, on Facebook or on Instagram or on Meetup or, in person in your local town, can be absolutely life-saving, not only in terms of getting the support that you may be lacking, but in terms of trying to finally access um, accurate information because there's a huge, huge problem with endometriosis and misinformation. And then that misinformation about what the disease is, about what the treatments are, that is absolutely um, prolonging our suffering with this disease because we're not getting the information that we need. And something with endometriosis is that the majority of doctors, they don't know how to treat endometriosis. And so learning early on that probably like 90% of the information that you're going to be exposed to on endometriosis is wrong. And that's why it's really important to learn the correct information. I think learning that, and that's not to sound like negative, or that's just like a fact. That is just like an absolute fact that like the majority of endometriosis information is going to be wrong. It's going to be wrong from the majority of doctors. It's wrong. And why is that? That's because like endometriosis guidelines have major problems. Like endometriosis research has major problems. The lack of research in endometriosis just due to like sexism in medicine. So the layers of the onion are very, very deep. And finding trustworthy sources for endometriosis is absolutely vital. And so if you're like, oh my gosh, where do I find that? I'm going to plug myself here, but I have a website on endometriosis called in16years.com, accurate information and links to more websites, more groups, more people spreading accurate information, including doctors and centers for endometriosis care. So you could check that out if you're just like, I don't know where to start.
Amazing, thank you. That was actually gonna be my next question for you is where can you find it? So definitely through your website, for sure. That's awesome. And then is where can people find you? I mean, you said your website there, but on Instagram, do you have any other platforms? I know you have your podcast if you want to mention it again.
Yeah, so I imagine you'll put the links like in the show notes of that episode. But yes, I have a podcast on endometriosis, and we really pride ourselves on accurate information in our podcast. There's two kinds of episodes. There's interviews with doctors. I have like some really expert doctor interviews on the podcast, and then we have interviews with advocates. It's a very educational podcast. The goal is to like go there and learn. Every episode is centered around a topic, whether that's, you know, the facts around the disease or bowel endometriosis or finding more self-compassion or, tips for communicating with our loved ones about this disease. So I think that's a great resource. And then I have my book, which is called Finding Peace with a Devastating Disease. I've received a lot of really great feedback on that, but not only is it it's yes, it's like my journey, but it's not really like a narrative of my endo story or anything. It's again once more centered on topics. And then at the end of every chapter, it has self-reflection questions for the reader or the listener because the audiobook is coming in March 2024. But it has self-reflection questions if you want to go through, so let's just say I talked about feeling like a burden. And then after at the end, it asks you to explore like, what are those feelings like for you? Right? Like, do you feel like a burden? When do those feelings pop up? When do you think those feelings started? So I think that's a really great exploration of how can we find how can we identify our own distorted thought patterns? How can we find our own meaning in our life? What does acceptance mean to us? Because at the end of the day, it's great to hear like me talking about this or something, but we want to bring it back to our own lives, right? And like I said, we want to find those tools for ourselves. So I think a lot of my content is really about that, is helping empower people to have the tools, whether that's to be able to speak to their doctor about their disease or to be able to find more peace in their life so that they can have just a little less emotional suffering.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. And yes, I will put it in the description notes section of the podcast as well. But thank you so much for joining me. I really do appreciate you taking the time. I know it does take energy and time out of the day. So I do appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Jess. I'm really happy to be on your show and I'm excited for your show and to listen to your episodes.